this game. So the game starts with Caro-Kann e5, advanced variation, bishop f5, h4, h5. So yeah, they are all book moves. So in this position, white has like two choices. One is first of all offering a bishop trade, and for example bishop to d3 and take e6. And later on, white will attack on the king side. For example, move the knight to f3, g5, and this knight to maneuver to the king side. And later we can push the f pawn and f5. So this is how we can attack the king side. And another approach, I think this is what white did in this game, that is push the c pawn and attack on the queen side. And after the c file is opened, white could plan to control the c file. But also I think black will also compete at the c file, and it depends on which side has a better control of the queen side. And e6, knight c3, white developed the knight, so far so good. Knight e7, and knight f3, knight g6. So bishop d3, yeah, I think that's the right timing to offer a bishop trade. Otherwise, the f5 bishop is really strong. And let's trade the bishop. Knight d7. Black is developing the knight to d7. That's the I think that's the only place for the ba knight. If it moves to a6, white can defend b4 very easy. So later, black will probably move the knight to b6, attack c4. And so I think the question for white is at which side should we attack our opponent? If we want to attack on the queen side, we should like develop bishop and move the rook to c file and control the c file. If we want to attack on the king side, we should, for example, develop knight and later push the f pawn. So in my opinion, I think if I would play as white, it's more likely to attack on the king side. And the reason is quite simple, because we have this pawn structure, so which means white has a larger space than its opponent at the king side. So when you have large space, it's easier for you to maneuver pieces. So I would consider, for example, knight g5. That's a direct threat. If we take the e6 pawn, we can win the g6 knight, and the knight has to go to e7. And the knight, the g5 square, I think it works like an outpost for the g5 knight, because black cannot really, it's very hard to push the f pawn. The e6 will be captured. So the knight can stay there forever, and we can attack f7. So I will start with attacking on the king side if I was playing as white. So white plays c5. Well, close to center. Maybe white want to block the dark square bishop, but I think black can keep attacking the king side with the b6. And this is what black did. That's good. So we need to fight back at the center, and the white offer a trade. So, well, yeah, it's a bit tricky. So if we take the pawn and the semi-open file is open, and later on the c file it's really hard to stop. And black, once black pushes upon the c file, so the d4 pawn will be threatened, and therefore the e file will be a weakness. And so I will think about playing b4 to keep this pawn structure. So in this case, at least I can have a very solid pawn structure at the center. So take, bishop g5, bishop e7, exchange. Yeah, so I would still think about playing knight g5 instead of play bishop g5, because I don't think we move two moves to trade the bishop is worthy. So we made two moves, bishop to g5 and e7, and our opponent just made one move. So it takes two moves, it takes an extra move to trade the bishop. I don't think that gives us anything. So I will move the knight to g5, and it's the same reason. So we are threatening knight e6. So after the trade in g3, we want to protect the pawn and also protect f4 and c5. Yeah, so this is what I said. Black is fighting at the center, and now it's a bit hard for white to deal with the center. So I mean, regardless you take my c5 pawn or not, I will take your pawn, and the e5 pawn will be a weakness. So it's really hard to defend, to be honest. Take, yeah, I think we're losing the pawn. Queen e2 and c4. Well, I think if I play black, I will castle first, make the king safe, and probably I will move my queen to c7 to attack the e5. So push the c pawn. Maybe we will move the queen to b4, but it's a little bit make this space a bit exposed. So I will make my king safe. And another thing is, how should we attack e5? So this is a question. This is the weakness we can focus on. And also the downside with c4 is the d4 is becoming a really good square for the knight. So usually if we have pawns like stay side by side, it's a good structure. We can control these 4 squares. And if we play c4, we block the queen for sure, but the knight can go to d4. Maybe not at this stage, but maybe knight b5, knight d4. Yeah, this is a very good square for the knight, for the white knights. White castle, rook ba, want to attack b2. Kind reminder when you think about king safety. Rook b1. Can we just push the b3? If you take, I don't think white will take the pawn because the back rank is a little bit problematic, right? And rook b8, if I take, queen b5, knight b7, but what about knight b5? And if you castle, then I move knight to g5. This pawn is under attack, and later I can move knight to d6. After knight to d6, my 2 knights can target at f7. So I think white will win the pawn back, and also the 2 knights are very active. So yeah, I think we can push b3, and the reason is because black hasn't a castle, so we can take this opportunity, open files, and attack the king. So rook b1, this is what white did. It's a little bit slow. Okay, knight f8. I think we should castle. Knight f8. I don't see the point of knight g f8. It blocked the king, and maybe black want to maneuver the knights. But if that is a plan, I will move the d7 knight first. So, and also we have a target, right? So it's good to keep the knights, 2 knights at e5. Knight d4, queen c5, rook fd1, knight back to g6. Yeah, I don't think knight g f8 really works. So knight go back and attack e5, f4. Okay, so these 2 pawns are protected. This f4 is protecting e5. That's good. And the g6 knight need to find another place, maybe e7 and f5. But remember the d4 knight. This is guarding f5. So we need to be aware of the knight trade. So knight e7, king h1 to like make the knight on pin. That's good. So I think that these 2 knights have control very good square. The only downside for white is the king is a bit exposed. So maybe move to h2 is better than h1, because moving to h1, this diagonal king is could be attacked. So king h2 is safer. g6 a4, knight c6, offering the knight trade. That's good. To remove the center knight by exchanging pieces. Knight b5, castle, knight d6. Well, I feel like d4 is a better square than d6 for the knight. The reason is when we move the knight to d4, it's a center knight. It controls a lot more space than knight d6. And also another thing is the knight can stop the d5 pawn. And we can also facilitate, for example, g4 and f5, and not say knight d4 can kick the queen, right? So I feel like knight d4 is better than knight d6, and knight d6, knight cannot really move to any other square, and also the knight, it's hard to corroborate or coordinate knight with some other right pieces. So yeah, but maybe knight to d4 is not accurate at this stage because we'll lose a4. So what about pushed upon the g4? If take queen to g4, I feel like the black king is a little bit like in danger if we pushed upon the h5, knight c5, aiming to knight e4, h5. Yeah, how can we protect g6? That's a problem. King g7, and then we can probably attack the queen. And if your queen goes to d7, for example, I feel like we can move king to g2 and later rook to h1 to attack the h file. And yeah, it's not okay to move the king to h file because we move the rook there. What about knight e4? Rook h1. Yeah, I don't think black have a very good way. Let's say, how about attack on the queen side? No, take, and knight e6. You see, the d4 knight is really powerful. Coordinated with the queen, attacking e6. So we can win the pawn. And also the king go down, can take the g6, the king go here, we can put a rook to h7, and white is winning. But yeah, so this is what I would plan to attack the king side. So knight e6. The first thing, as I said, the knight is not really helpful, and also the a4 pawn is losing. Okay, black's offering a knight trade. Okay. So yeah, I think white can still play g4. Rook c1. Okay, so what about d4? It's a check, and we have super powerful double pawn. Rook f6. Yeah, these two pawns are way like powerful than these two because they can reach like third rank very easily. And also thinking about this open diagonal, the king is quite exposed. So I would play d4. So black pushed here. Rook c2, well, that's a mistake because we will win the a5 pawn. The pawn, like the b1 rook is hanging. So I still think white can push the g4 and trying to find some opportunity on the king side. So this is how we can attack black, because I don't think white has better chance than its opponent to attack on the queen side. Black has very good structures and the pawns. So it's good for us to attack on the king side, and this is why we push up the pawns, right? We push up the pawns because we want to attack our opponent, and so we should continue doing that. Yeah, black did well gaining the pawn, and another very important thing is the rook and the queen can collaborate. d4, yeah, and d3. Oh, that's good. That's a very good move. Yeah, then I think black's winning. So yeah, so that's a very interesting game. I think for white's perspective is thinking about a way to attack on the king side, and for black is, I think black did really well to get this tactical opportunity. But another thing is thinking about control the center, thinking about, yeah, maybe we shouldn't push the c pawn too early. And another thing is like this, maybe you should play d4, especially if you remember like this, push d4, and then we have super strong like pawns and open up this diagonal. So yeah, to utilize our advantage at the center, and how can we attack on the queen side. So this is a question good for black to think about. That's it.